Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. Welcome to this webinar, Bridging Science and Business, Leveraging Insights to Showcase True Medical Value. Very excited with the panel that we have today. We'll introduce that panel here in a minute, but first, just some housekeeping. So if you want to ask questions during the webinar, use the question functionality, the ask a question Q&A functionality that's in the Zoom bar, not the chat functionality. What we'll try to do is get to questions throughout the webinar as they come in. And also we'll have some time at the end to ask questions as well. I know that this webinar is being recorded for on demand. And so if you're watching after this live event and you have questions as well, you can submit those to me at Within3 or through the Within3 website. With that, I will go ahead and get started and introduce the panel. We have this webinar scheduled for an hour. I think we have a lot of great content, some great experts. And so let's jump right in. We'll start off with Vic. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Lance. I'm Vic Ho. I've been in medical affairs for about coming up to 20 years now in large pharma and medium-sized pharma, and insights is really close to my heart because I've been privileged enough to be involved in the creation of insight systems in the last 7 years and really seen how a concerted effort in this area can really unleash the power of medical affairs and the conversation with the wider business about patient care. So thanks for the invite today. Looking forward to today's webinar.
Great. Leona.
Hi, everybody. My name is Leona Bluestein. I'm head of medical affairs operations and medical information at Idorsia Pharmaceuticals. I've been here for about 2 years now and helping out with the launch of our first drug, as well as building out the capabilities, which does include insight management. So it's been interesting to see with my previous career of large pharma, small pharma, of the importance of building a correct structure and management of insights to make sure it's done correctly. So it's been great to be part of this panel and learning from everybody else here.
And Michael.
Good morning and good afternoon. I'm Michael Kahn. I lead operations for medical affairs at Spark Therapeutics. We are a gene therapy company based in Philadelphia. I've been with the company since 2015. I implemented the insight system here, and I have a real passion and interest for not only insight systems and technology, but the organizational mechanisms involving how those insights are communicated throughout the organization and used to refine strategic questions. And also, I'm looking very much to learning from my colleagues on the panel as well.
And I should go ahead and introduce myself as well. So I'm Lance Hill. I'm the CEO of Within3. Within3 is an insights management software company. So we build solutions for organizations to radically improve and mature their ability to generate insights, analyze insights, provide value back to their organizations. And so I'm a technologist by background, not a medical professional. And so I look at things a little bit through that lens in terms of what are some of the innovations that are going on and how can those really help us mature as an industry. I've been focused exclusively on life sciences for 20 years, in healthcare generally for 25 plus at this point. Really, really pleased to be here with these experts. So how we're going to go do this today is we're going to have a little bit of an introductory presentation just to level set the table of what we mean by insights and insights management, and what is the current state of insights management within the industry based on some survey data that we have that Reuters conducted a survey earlier this year. And then we'll have some panel conversation around those topics. And then we're going to talk about 4 technologies. I like to focus on some of the technologies that are making a difference in the real world. So not kind of future science fair sorts of things, but very practical sets of technologies that are improving our ability to do work. And we'll talk about some of those and then go back to the panel again and really talk about where insights are headed, what experiences are, what some of the opportunities are going forward. And again, please feel free along the way to sprinkle in Q&A as we go, and I'll try to get to those as I can during the panel, if not at the end, and certainly if I don't get to them, we can follow up offline afterwards. So let's go ahead and maybe level set what we're talking about today, which is insights and insights management. One of the things that often comes up just to start off is, what do we mean by insight? What is an insight? What's the difference between an insight and a finding or a KPI or a metric or data? So an insight sits above all those other terms that I just mentioned. An insight, and this definition is the Medical Affairs Professional Society has a white paper that was released where a definition of insights was put together through a set of experts. And really what it is this. An insight is something that is an aha moment that either validates what we're doing. So we look at some data, some findings, some observations from different sources, and we conclude from looking at that information that the strategy that we're doing is the strategy we should continue to do, the activities that we're doing are the activities we should continue to do because they're validated by what we're learning from the different sources of information that we have access to, or an insight might suggest that we need to do something different. But either way, it's action-oriented. It's not just Dr. Jones said X. That's a data point. That's an observation. An insight might be Dr. Jones said X, and that means we should do Y. And we should do Y is also validated by other data points or other observations we're getting. So an insight is action-oriented. It's an analysis done by smart professionals looking at broad data sets to understand how to be more effective with the strategy. So insights management is the process of gathering, dealing, determining those insights and managing and executing them throughout the organization. And insights management is a very, very hot topic right now, not just within medical affairs, but generally across the industry. One of them is because it has such tremendous impact on therapy performance. So within our customer set, I've listed some examples of ROI stories that we've gotten access to. But therapy performance in terms of making better decisions, knowing what the market is doing, knowing what the market needs and acting accordingly can really make sure that therapies end up in the hands of the patients that need them when they need them and they have access to them. Productivity as well, the ability to make sure that we're spending time doing the right things and not spending time doing a lot of kind of grunt work and manual labor in and around generating market intelligence and turning that into action. And then there's cost savings involved with technology as well. The technology innovation over the last 3 years has been pretty amazing and is really driving down costs tremendously. So most organizations that embark on an insights management strategy, the far left is most important, therapy performance. How can we be more effective with what we're doing with our therapies? But productivity and cost also factor into why this matters. So how should an insights management process work? At a very high level, it starts off with understanding what you want to know. What are we looking to understand? As opposed to, we have a bunch of data coming in and we're just kind of looking at it to see what pops out randomly. A mature insight process starts off with a lot of thinking. What is it that we need to know and understand to either validate that the strategy we're executing is the right one, or what do we need to ask to make sure that we might learn that our strategy is incorrect? And then once that framework is understood, and those are called key insight topics and questions. And again, that's a standard methodology that is being backed by MAPS and other organizations. Then we gather those information from all the different places within medical that we can learn about the marketplace. Some of those listed here: group engagements, advisory boards, steering committees, field, one-on-one, social, what's going on digitally, disease community landscape, population health, real-world data, medical information. There's a list of these sources that medical can gather information that will help provide answers to these key insight topics and questions. We then have to analyze those together. The other thing about insights is they're not one and done. A lot of times the insight is the trend. Is this trend continuing, declining, growing? We have to analyze all those together, collaborate cross-functionally with peers, and then refine, take action. And then the loop continues. This is kind of a never-ending process. Michael's presented on this before, that this idea that insights management is continuous. So that's kind of the backdrop of what we're talking about with insights. And just to start off the conversation with the panel, what I'd like to do is share some survey data. So there's a white paper coming out. You'll have access to it. Instructions will be at the end of this webinar. So Reuters conducted a survey to 243 medical affairs professionals about the current state and current health of insights management within those organizations. I picked a couple of qualitative results in the survey that I think capture the essence of what we've learned. We collect a ton of data, but we don't know how to turn it into insights. And there's too much noise. There's too much information, too much noise. It's a really difficult task. Those two things kind of set qualitatively the tone. A couple of things from the survey that I thought were interesting to share, and I'd love to get the panel's opinion on. Only 9% of the survey respondents said that they're using between 75 and 100% of the information they have available to them to generate insights. And looking at it differently, 50% said they're using 20% or less. So you think about the amount of money that goes into R&D and the amount of time and effort that goes into bringing therapies to market. And 50% of respondents say that we're using 20% or less of the multi-channel sets of data that we have available to us to make business decisions. That's a big opportunity. 65% of respondents said that lack of insights endanger product launch, which is a pretty critical event, obviously. And the processes remain in most organizations highly manual or cumbersome or inefficient. Only 8% of respondents said they have highly automated processes around these specific tasks and topics. So I want to go to the panel, and maybe I'll start off. I'll go the other direction. Start off with Michael. Michael, what's your reaction to those survey results, and what are your feelings on where we are with insights management generally?
Sure. My first reaction was like yours when I did the math. And if you could go back to the percentage below 50% slide, 25 plus 40 is 65, 79% of respondents, almost 4 out of 5, are below 50%, which kind of gets to the noise problem you were referring to earlier. How do you separate insights from the noise? How do you, worded differently, how do you generate insights from data? I think those are actually two different questions, is my first reaction to that. If you're translating data into insights, that is going to be a very challenging task for artificial intelligence or technology to handle. But generating or identifying legitimate insights from a swath of text, which are data, but they're unstructured data, right? They're not structured data in the parlance of computer science. We're starting to get to points in the technology that can start to do with that, but I think there's a long way to go.
Leona, what's your reaction to what you saw?
Yeah, so similar to Michael, I was actually quite surprised with this statistic as well. And some of the things we try to mitigate with this is to really understand what is coming into our systems in terms of the insights, and have a robust approval process in place to see, before it really gets into the system, to see if it's truly an actionable insight. And so, a lot of times, a lot of companies don't have this type of process in place. And so you get a lot of crap in and then crap out, right? So it's really important to make sure that, at least in the beginning, while you're still having like a new field team or new team members, to be able to see what type of insights are coming in, to make sure they're actionable before they get fed really into any kind of analysis that you do on the insights. And this allows for training and coaching of our team members if we do identify that these insights are, for example, just observations and not really actionable insights. So really starting off the process from the beginning is critical. And then hopefully will mitigate what we see here is the ability to analyze the collected insights if you have a robust set of insights in the first place.
So Vic, one of the things that I think, I've heard from many folks around that statistic is siloing, and that different organizations have access, sub-organizations have access to different information. They're trying to make decisions, that those get rolled up into kind of maybe big clunky reports that are maybe quarterly, varying levels of management interaction with those reports. when you look at this picture and kind of think of those stats, where do you see the biggest opportunities for us?
Yeah, so first of all, I just want to congratulate on asking the right people for this survey, because we're really in the practice of helping clinicians to follow evidence for evidence-based medicine. So when we're developing strategy, we should be looking at insight as our form of evidence to inform our strategy. And so by asking those senior people in this survey, what you've uncovered here is that common problem. And you're quite right, Lancelot. I think the thing that's holding people back at this point, if they feel comfortable with the definition of an insight, which still there's room for improvement on, is when that insight is put somewhere, the somewhere doesn't connect to each other. So it may well be that individual reactive or questioned insights from the MSLs come into a CRM system or into a database or a spreadsheet or a form, and the information is stored somewhere. It may be certainly those group engagement reports, like advisory board reports, will be written beautifully with actions pulled out, but then stored in a SharePoint or a Box folder, which has certain permissions for very good reasons. And it's very difficult then to extract that incredible insight into somewhere common to be able to see it all in one place, to spot the patterns in the insight and draw even more value and meaning from those insights. So I think it was interesting to see that there are a lot of the people surveyed and the companies surveyed all saying the same thing, that they're not quite at the stage where they can have everything accessible to be really confident that they haven't missed an important insight, and finding technology solutions that can connect into all those little places and provide something that's easy to see, rather than maybe a set of PowerPoint slides or just a list of written insights in an Excel spreadsheet, would just be a fantastic step forward for all of us.
So Leona, there are a couple of questions around every interaction I have in the field, for example, with every physician, and I get some observation back. That's not necessarily an insight. Or I might get data back through medical information that at the time isn't an insight, it's just an information. But later on, as we do some post-analysis, we recognize that it becomes a trend or it becomes something that is an insight. How do you think about the mountain of data and getting from that insights?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it really, I think, does stem from having the key insight topics and questions that are the priority for the function, right? So that it helps narrow down what we're trying to listen in and get what type of insights from, because otherwise you're not really sure what you should be bringing back, and everything could be, you think might be important, but it's really not. So really having those key insight topics defined up front, and maybe they change over time if you're pre-launch or post-launch, and then having the questions that, again, will help frame what type of insights should be coming in that are the listening priorities for the team.
And Michael, what about things that come up that you weren't expecting? How do you think about and handle those and integrate that into your process?
Oh, those are some of the best kinds of insights, because those are the ones that spur thought and reflection. Validation is important, but we're all susceptible to confirmation bias. So it's okay, we already knew that. Well, that's useful. If something comes in that's contradictory, then I think it's important to do some independent assessment of that and say, okay, does this stance make sense? Kick it around a little bit. And then a team might want to actually make that a question and try and get similar reactions from others with similarities and differences in the type of HCP or KOL, right? So you might want to look at it regionally. You might want to look at different specialties within the same region. But try and get a sense of whether this is an outlier insight and opinion, or whether it's actually mainstream.
So the question on what are some examples, some kind of real world examples of insights, maybe genericized enough to protect anything confidential, but maybe someone on the panel talk about, in your experience, some times where insights have come out of your work that have been material to what you've done as an organization.
I can take that, and I will genericize it a bit, but I was in a field where it was fairly crowded with a number of different agents, but with primarily two classes, and within those classes, different durations of action. And one insight I remember getting really early that affected the way we thought about it was understanding which class might be used as first line for a given population and why. And that helped identify our strategy because we were in one class and we were set up a particular way, right? And so once we validated that insight, it was important to refine a strategy around that.
Anyone else want to jump in on that one?
Well, often you're uncovering gaps in either data where more data is needed to investigate an effect or a lack of effect, but also misunderstandings of data that's been packaged in a certain way with the intention of helping people follow the evidence base, but it's just been misinterpreted, and that misinterpretation has had grown legs and ran away with itself. And by identifying it early, you can then create educational programs or even addendums or helping to clarify what the data is really trying to show. And that can be incredibly important, not just in how medical affairs interacts and the medical plans, but also the commercial plan for where to focus the energy at different stages of the life cycle. So I'm sure actually everyone on this webinar and listening in can probably think of sometimes when they had an insight and how, when that's acted on in a timely manner, either within the country at the regional level or at the global level, it can lead to real change.
Leona, anything on your end that comes to mind?
Yeah, so interestingly, pre-launch, similar to what Vic had mentioned, I think it's great to be able to have the insights that could help drive what additional evidence generation we need to have, what external education we need to be able to produce from a company standpoint. And then like post-launch, for example, to understand any kind of changes in knowledge or opinion or behavior surrounding our disease state or even product. And so those things really are important just to be able to bring in and to see what things we might need to do differently or update within our company.
Yeah, and we see a lot in our work. We've had clients gather insights that actually have helped them with payer strategy in terms of what they need to from a market access point of view that they otherwise didn't know. Confirmation bias, I think you mentioned that, Michael. A lot of times what happens is, we spend so long internally working on a strategy. We know the data inside and out. We're convinced our therapy is wonderful. And it can be easy to kind of assume everyone else will believe that as well. And so getting insights to understand what the current market understanding education needs are, and is that regional or does that differ in some areas so that you can react that way, is something that can really, we've seen produce very, very tangible results. Insights, we had a client that really uncovered a whole new licensing opportunity through a partner via an insight process, something that they as an organization weren't going to uncover or execute on themselves, but create a huge opportunity for them. So there's a lot of very tangible outcomes with insights. And while it can be difficult to say, oh, this one, especially in medical, that this one resulted in this sort of financial direct benefit, that's not really how we measure ourselves in medical. It's pretty clear, though, to see how the work that we're doing based on what we're learning from the marketplace improves. And to me, what I find interesting, and maybe love the panel's thoughts on it, is if you look at this middle bar here, the places where you can gather information to learn about what the real world is doing, medical affairs has more of those channels and opportunities than either commercial or R&D does, which really puts medical as the ability to be the strategic pillar in driving insights in a very, very powerful way. I'd love to get the panel's thoughts on that. How does medical play with insights relative to other parts of the organization, or how should it? Maybe
I think at the moment, a lot of that work is being done very manually through meetings, through individual lead MSLs or leaders of teams or therapeutic area leads looking at all of those separate sources, not integrated into each other, pulling them against the topics and summarizing them, bringing them to other stakeholders. And so it's many, many hours of analysis, manual analysis, and just as many hours of meetings and discussion. And so there's a really big opportunity to speed that whole process up. And I've been watching what's coming through in the chat, some great comments about the bits that you're going to get to in the second half of this webinar, Lance, around the technology and the tools and the AI piece, because I think that really will help to be an excellent tool for this. But it is about getting it when an important insight arises, how quickly can you get that to the right decision maker internally to decide whether it needs to be actioned, and not coming across it a year later when the next plan and the next set of tactics have already been developed and you've missed it because all your systems weren't connected with each other.
Lance, if I may, I'll be mildly controversial and actually disagree with you on one point. I'm interested in your take. I don't sense that medical affairs has more channels than other functions. I think medical affairs rightfully focuses on HCPs, and these are the 4 channels that have evolved currently for obtaining insights. But for example, our patient advocacy organization has and does run patient advisory boards. There are patient groups that are on Facebook and are posting publicly, and they're being evaluated. Our payers have field engagement with payers, so do our commercial teams. So I'm not sure that there's actually more channels here for medical affairs, but I do think medical affairs is probably ahead of the other functions in identifying insights as really critical to fulfilling the mission. And this gets back to the phrase, insights are really at recurrency, right? Whereas I don't think they necessarily are for the other functions. So just a little bit of controversy.
Maybe the word more is arguable. I think, but clearly I think what medical can do is have deeper discussions with different audiences than many parts of the organization can have due to compliance reasons. And some organizations, patient and market access, sometimes they're part of medical, sometimes they're not. Sometimes they're both. Sometimes you have global versus regional areas there. So some of that is organizational driven. But clearly, I think looking at R&D doesn't have the access to the breadth of folks in stakeholders to speak with. And on the commercial side is limited from a compliance point of view and the types of discussions they can have. And then I think medical information, I'd love your thoughts, Leona. Medical information is also a place where a lot can be learned. And that's obviously driven from medical function. What are your thoughts on either the quantity or the quality of information or observations that can be gained from medical and how that might be useful to other parts of the organization?
Yeah, I definitely do think for medical affairs, it is a priority for us to be able to collect and analyze and disseminate insights, honestly, compared to the other functions within the organization. I think from other parts of the organization, they have other priorities. So for example, I don't think in sales, they're out there trying to collect insights. That's not their priority, right? So they want to go out and sell. But I do think for medical, we are really the eyes and ears in the field. And that is like when our team goes out there, we within medical affairs, medical information are always trying to listen in. And what could we do to advance our strategic imperatives and our organizational needs at the time? So I definitely think it's more of a priority. I think we definitely have more insights coming in that are more actionable, I would say, and relevant to the key stakeholders as well. And so there's a lot more silos, I think, within other functions of the organization where they're maybe doing a marketing ad board, but again, they're not bringing it back to seeing how exactly it might be tying in to the strategy of the company.
Vic, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's very well said, Leona, actually. I wouldn't disagree with that at all. And nothing further to add on that one.
All right, well, let's jump. Sorry a second. My screen just unpopped here. Let me reshare it. I don't know what went on there. Okay, hopefully everyone can see that. Great. So let's go ahead to the next topic, which is what are some of the technologies that are influencing our ability to do this? So I think we've discussed, I think the panel agreed that this is a vitally important function for medical. And so it seems like if that was the case, there would have been years of innovation going into systems that make this very easy and very powerful and simple. That's not been the case. Each of the functions within that flow chart typically have evolved with their own set of technologies and their own set of tactics. And really, insights management has been a tremendous amount of technology innovation going on, companies like Within3 and others, to make this more effective. So I'm going to talk about 4 technologies very, very quickly, spend about 2 minutes per technology. And then I'd love to go back to the panel and really understand where you see the future of insights management going and how organizations can become more effective, either people, process, tools, all 3, as it pertains to this topic. So the first one I'll talk about is insights management platforms. So just like CRM platforms were built out of commercial for customer relationship management and focus on contact and customer relationship management, companies are innovating now around insights management platforms that are built for this express purpose of helping these functions and these processes exist in the organization. And so as an example, one of the things that these platforms do is this idea that there's a set of key insight topics and questions, or information is being organized and shared around those. These sets of technologies build that into your user interface. They understand what those are. They're aggregating sets of data and observations into those categories to make them much easier to analyze, grouping all of those things together, really being able to dive down within any of those into specific sets of information, all in order to make the communication of this participation in insights across the organization better and easier. So these technologies, these workflows within these systems are rapidly evolving, and there's a lot of innovation happening there. I'll hit the second layer of this chart, which is what are some of the innovations happening at some of the ways that we can gather observations or data and pull it into an insights process. So the first one I'll talk about is around group engagement technology, ad boards, steering committees, things like that, and use specifically of asynchronous style platforms that are designed from the outset to drive insight gathering. And on our platform, we have a new version coming out on August 1 that is really going to be a game changer in terms of driving the volume of insights that you can gather from these engagements, saving the time it takes to manage and work with those and generate summaries, strong application of AI throughout, which I'll get to in a bit. But these systems, more than just like a Zoom meeting that we're on right now, are designed to help organizations get more and more thoughtful insights and then drive them into their process faster with less work and less time. Because ultimately what you want to do is have those insights surface and rise and be actionable. Social listening is another one that some organizations are doing robustly, others are not. But in today's world, so much of science, especially around medical congresses, ASCO just finished for those in the oncology space, happens online and is shared online. Reactions happen online. Competing therapies are trying to drive scientific narratives online. And so the ability to understand, and then the patient voice, a lot of that, especially on the advocacy side, happens digitally. And so the ability to pull that in, the data's out there, it's available. The challenge has been systems to gather it, organize it, and make it actual from an insights point of view have not been designed that way up until now, up until the last couple of years. And so more and more organizations are including the digital view to augment what they're learning in some of those other channels, what they're learning in the field, what they're learning from population health information, et cetera, in real time to help them make better decisions. So that's the third one. And then the fourth one I'll talk about is the challenge around analyzing, summarizing, analyzing, communicating insights is a very manual, very manual process, very time consuming for organizations that try to do that, especially cross-functionally. And that's one of the places where AI is practically driving improvements right now. So I'm going to talk about AI just in three general buckets. These all overlap, but generative AI and ChatGPT is what's in the news and getting all the rage right now, is really good at summarizing data and text, creating first drafts of papers and messaging and materials. And I'm talking for a medical context now. And so organizations, I think, and technology companies are really embedding generative AI to help simplify some of those sorts of functions. Insights analysis AI is slightly different. That is the understanding of how insights are presented and thought about within a medical organization or an organization more broadly, and being able to do deeper automated analysis to help separate the wheat from the chaff, to help find the needle in the haystack, to help trend things over time. So that's being able to understand that these things roll up into the area of unmet need, and we're trending that over time, or things like that. That's a different slant than just kind of the horizontal generative AI sorts of platforms that are being talked about in the news right now. And then personal assistant AI, which is a flavor of AI that's really meant to help augment someone's individual effectiveness in whatever their task is. And so you see that everything from Microsoft Office trying to drive a virtual assistant AI to help your Outlook, schedule your meetings and respond to emails. In a medical context, it's things like next best action that should be taken with particular stakeholder engagement, helping a moderator understand what they should be probing on, asking on, following up on in a group engagement, helping draft creation of presentations and things like that, and summaries and reports. So those are kind of three general areas of AI. I will say that the speed at which innovation is happening here is about as fast as I've ever seen in my 25-year career. Every 6 months, I'm shocked with what our technology can do or is getting ready to do than what it did 6 months earlier. And I think everyone else is as well. And so what I'll leave it here is to say, I think from a medical context, the way I look at this is it's about how are we applying these things to get value. It's not about just jumping on the bandwagon of the acronyms, but we're starting to see the applications in practice with some of these technologies that I think will make some of the challenges that we talked about at the very beginning, that Reuters survey, a bit easier to deal with. So that's a quick overview of Ford technology. So it's insights management, process, and workflows in the systems. It's better ability to gather and organize data and observations from different parts of the real world. And then technologies that really help us analyze, manage, react to, and share that information. So I'll start off, and maybe I'll start off with Michael. As you think about technology specifically, or maybe just generally where you see insights management headed and the maturity of headed within organizations, what comes to mind? What comes to mind for you?
Yeah, the first thing that comes to mind for me is a move from your second bullet. If you can go back to that slide for me to prompt me, that would be helpful. But from the second bucket to the first bucket, from insights management as identification of sentiment analysis, other forms of analysis to generative. For us right now, the holy grail would be looking subjectively at the language of our insights, being able to generate a good first draft of an insights report and really be hands-off on that. In the chat, there's a discussion going on around the privacy and the ethical points on this. And this is what fascinates me and gives me a fair amount of discomfort, not necessarily the loss of privacy over it, but the fact that we are in a field where people's lives are at stake. And so the stakes are higher than in other fields. And so the idea of turning a task over from a trained human to a computer without essentially redoing the work is really an important consideration. And yet, this field is entirely comfortable, and rightfully so, with developing, for example, a first draft of a manuscript of a clinical trial from a qualified medical writer who may have never treated a patient and is not an expert in the therapeutic area, because we have trained these people appropriately, and because as an industry, we've put into place processes that hopefully ensure that we will get good product. And there's no way to train, air quotes, a computer to do that. And so unfettered, correct first time out, first draft gives me the willies a little bit. And I will not be an early adopter of this, but I'm fascinated as to where it's going to go.
Leona, what are your thoughts on any of these technologies, or where you think this is headed?
Yeah, I like how Michael just jumped into the future. I'm still trying to figure out the present situation, which is really understanding all the technologies that we have available right now. And it has been tremendous to see the changes over time and the positive way of being able to find an end-to-end solution. I will say the biggest issue right now is there's just so many options available to you to figure out what technology you want to use. But at the end of the day, I think the biggest gap for us is being able to find something that will, again, be end-to-end, meaning where you can put in your insights, have it analyzed, have it visualized. And a lot of times I think companies are going with so many different technologies, but when you have so many different technologies, you have to figure out the best way to integrate it. And so again, it's just really figuring out what company can really do it from end to end in a seamless fashion and be able to incorporate all these things, Lance, that you had mentioned, which is the social listening, the virtual engagement piece with the group engagement, for example, congresses, et cetera. And so I think just trying to figure out, again, that solution, the optimal solution without having too many is going to be the goal for many of us.
Yeah, and I think we're really lucky that there is so much being talked about this at the moment. There's plenty of places you can go to research and upskill yourself and what the terminology is, what the privacy risk really is, depending on how you do it. And there are different places where you can minimize risk. So if you're looking at firewalling the information, training an AI just on your data and using it to summarize that data, and yet still be able to get back to where the original sources came from, that can be a very good shortcutting tool in that insights propagation process internally without putting the patient at risk. And it's only after doing that for some time and gaining confidence with the limitations of that you would move into areas of greater risk. And certainly I think I agree with everyone on the panel that you wouldn't go straight to taking some data and going and putting that out as a standard medical response or building your strategy for you from scratch. But I'm a real optimist in this space. I think there is it will be a very important tool that will become part AI and language generation in particular, and rephrasing of things into ways that resonate with different individuals and different teams within the organization to make sure that that insight is acted upon. That's going to be a great helping hand for medical affairs, because up until this point, along with a few other departments, we've been really trying to shout loudly about insight, but we need something that helps get that message faster and deeper through the organization.
Yeah, just reacting to something that you said, Vic, which I think is very, very important, is the ability to traverse from the high-level insight or summary back down to the source, to validate that what the conclusion is matched by, you can get back to the actual data. I think, thematically, what we're seeing is, I don't think anyone, Michael, is to the point of like the robots are taking over, and like in the real world I'm talking about, right? We're like, yeah, and so all my manuscripts, I just press a button and it generates them, and all my writers go away. Like I've not heard anyone who's there or thinking about that yet. What I am seeing though is a little bit of a difference in trying to take the expertise of the humans and starting off with something that's 80%, 70%, 50% there and curate it. And just the time that you get, the grunt time to get from the 0 to 50% on a lot of this, which isn't really value add and usually isn't where the expertise comes in, these systems can really help take out. Love your thoughts on that as you heard. I heard that you're kind of you'll be a follower adopter versus an early adopter.
For significant generation of initial materials. One of our attendees makes a really good point in the chat that nobody wants to spend hours sifting through Excel sheets. I think that's just it. We develop tools and technologies to make our work quicker and frankly easier. I think at heart, we're all just a little bit lazy. Let me put that out there. But with the best of intentions, in an ideal world, we want to free up the grunt work so that we can do more meaningful, productive work, not lie on the beach and eating bonbons, but I digress. But I agree with you. I think, the goal is to take the drudgery out of it. I think 50% would be arbitrary. If AI got us halfway there and knocked out several hours a month or a quarter, that would be a meaningful advance.
And I just want to also bring it something else that popped up multiple times in the chat, which was around human bias. So we all carry a viewpoint that we look at an insight through, especially if you're the person that brought that insight into the organization. You're quite emotionally attached to it. You think you found a wow, aha moment. And so we're shaping an insight as we capture it and record it. And I think one of the exciting opportunities with this is that we can layer over the top of that other insight that has different sets of diverse bias and let the machine learning do what it's good at, which is looking for patterns without that filter that we can't avoid in ourselves. So it will come out with some things that we would never normally spot. We still then, of course, need to go back to the source of where those come from so that we don't end up with some sort of weird chimera of an insight that is not real. It's like a fictional amalgamation of things that are not related. But we're scientists, we can do this as long as we can trace it back to the original raw data. So I think it's really exciting.
So in terms of tracing back to the original data, it almost a picture like this assumes, right, that information from various sources can kind of come together to be analyzed together. And I think the survey results said for a lot of organizations, that's just not the reality. I think Leona and Michael, you both in your organizations have taken some pretty significant steps towards trying to gather holistic views for the work that you do. Maybe start with you, Leona. Was it always that way? And if not, how did you start to make it more that way?
Yeah, it wasn't easy, I would say. I think it's just for the function and the business to understand how important it is. And so being able to show the value of these things coming together and what the outputs are will really be, I guess, the advocate for us to be able to move this forward and continue to utilize it, right? So I think until seeing what is the end result or the deliverable, I think people don't have that appreciation. And so it just took some time to be able to say, here's how these things fit together. Here's the importance and what will be the output if we are able to do everything together and analyze it together in this way, in this fashion. Then people have an aha moment and say, wow, now I understand. And this is really the value of being able to utilize something that can do all this in one.
Michael, so Sparks, not a massive organization, but yet still, I'm sure within your organization, you have different functions and the information pools, perhaps in different functions. How do you, is it easy to bring that together? Has it always been? How do you feel about that middle layer and bringing that together?
Just to clarify, when you say bring together, do you mean across the organization or the medical affairs insight? Across the organization. I think it varies by team. And it varies by therapeutic area. And a lot of this has to do with organizational structure. If there's a consistent governance structure and really clearly understood roles and responsibilities, and medical affairs is established as the bringer of insights, and that's understood across the organization, I think we'd all hope that that's the norm and the ideal. It probably is not. One observation I have about my company is that the governance model and the team model differs across therapeutic areas. And so that system works differently in different areas. And so we have different communication tools and styles we use to really translate those insights and have conversations about them and refine the strategy depending on which medical director and medical communications leader I'm working with on a given day.
So Vic, maybe for the whole panel, there's a question. I'm going to generalize a little bit. There's a question and around the metrics as it pertains to insights. And so, a metric is 36% of this or 47% of that, right? The metrics tend to be a data-centric sort of thing. We live in a data-centric world, though. My experience is that communicating insights in terms of their impact or potential impact can be very, very effective and differentiates, because you're basically, if this action, then this potential impact to what we're currently doing versus the status quo. But how do you all, and so that's part of it. The other thing that I've seen is the communication of insights. A lot of times the audience for that tends to be senior management. And so being effective at concisely communicating these things to senior management, how does the panel think about kind of the sharing of insights and the communication of insights and being able to show value through the insights that medical is bringing?
Well, first of all, I don't think it should be the more insights you gather, the better. I think that drives the wrong behavior. I think it drives down quality of insights and thought taken to really understand what's the implication of this information, thoughts, opinion, behavior that I'm witnessing, and capture that as an insight. And also, true insights can be quite rare. And I have heard people saying that, well, every MSL interaction should result in some kind of insight. Otherwise, what are you talking about? I would disagree with that. I think there are many different types of conversations that MSLs have, and they always touch on what's important to the clinician if the MSL is doing a great job. It doesn't mean it warrants documenting an insight in the system. So how do we measure the value of insights? I think it's really around the taking accountability piece again. So the medical teams, but also anybody in an organization that comes across something that is an insight, are they taking accountability to put it into the system, but to try and drive through at the local level or with their peers to draw attention to that insight, to the people that are analyzing and triaging before or after some sort of AI step? Are they bringing those thoughts and insights into multifunctional team meetings and linking it to the strategy or showing where it challenges the strategy? And so it's not quite a simple diagnostic metric that you can measure. And I think we need to make sure at this early stage of better insight systems, we don't fall into that trap, because it's very tempting to measure volume of input into any new system that you develop. But really all that shows you is that people know the system exists and they're using it. It doesn't, so I think that would be my plea to anybody watching this and who is designing a system or buying a system, is try to think of better ways of knowing whether your insight system is working and being used and is being valuable. Maybe start by asking the decision makers, where do they go for their insight? It should be your system, and they should be going to it regularly, and they should definitely be going to it before they make any big decisions to change the strategy. Because if they're not, then your system's not working because they're not attracted to it. And that might be some soft skills around and behaviors as well as the technology itself.
Great point, Michael. Leona, reactions?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting. We've been talking a lot about the technology piece and collection of insights and all that, but I think probably the most important part is the communication back to leadership, and doing it often enough, right? Sometimes I hear people saying, oh, I share it like once a year, and that's concerning, right? You should be able to have a set point where, for example, it's a quarterly basis, but then if there are insights that come in that are critical at that time, you need to bring those up earlier and with the right partners within the organization. Having some sort of like template in place of like understanding what are the trends, the different visualizations, some outliers that you're hearing as well. I think it's good to have a customization of the type of how you present the insights is critical too. and really focus it on your listening priorities, not just like a data dump of like, here's all the insights and what should we do, but really have it focused on your listening priorities so that there's a clear understanding of how it lines up back to either the strategic imperatives or the questions that the company has. And then I think the big miss sometimes we have seen as well is we present it to leadership and then people never hear back from in terms of the MSLs or the field team to be able to come back and say, here's what we presented, here's what we heard back, here's what we're going to do. And so that loop is very critical to be able to have from the beginning to end as well.
I just want to bounce off one thing you said there, Leona, because it's the speed at which you can understand something because you've got a listening topic or a key insight topic or question. I've seen that in action as the power of the value of insights, where you've gone from a position of consciously not knowing something. You've used the eyes, the ears, the mechanisms in medical affairs to better understand that area. And it may be that they'd already been talking about it, so it wasn't even seeding a question, but you're suddenly collecting the knowledge from people's brains and from the answers that they've heard and the insight they've gathered. And how quickly you can go from not knowing to knowing so that you can take action. And that is power right there. That it would cost a lot of money to try and do that in a different way, but it already exists in the organization.
Yeah, it's interesting, Vic. You can imagine an organization who, pick whatever time frame, right? Organization A is able to do this at best quarterly. An organization B is able to do this monthly or biweekly, depending on the maturity of the systems and the processes. What the advantage would be in terms of nimbleness in the marketplace, and the ability to stop things that aren't working and do more of things that are. It's a really incredible potential difference when you think about it. And so I agree with you wholeheartedly. Michael, what are your thoughts? We have a couple of minutes left. Any closeout takeaways from this conversation? I'll ask every panelist on the end here.
Lance, I think so. One thing I think we often, for lack of anything better, use volume of insights as a metric because it's easy to measure, and I wholeheartedly agree with those who have said, volume is not what we're after here because that just leads to garbage in, garbage out, right? One way of measuring the speed of that circle, when you think about refining the strategy, is how often do insights that come up from key questions result in revising and refining and getting more detailed and specific on the question? How many times do you revise your questions a year? If you're revising them twice a year, you're probably leading the industry, I would think. I'm pushing my group to do them not wholesale, but selected questions in the list of key scientific information questions, as we call them, quarterly, with monthly pulse reports, because the faster you get those questions refined, the more up-to-date and tailored those field interactions are going to be. And that's where you potentially have a leg up in your competition.
Leon, any last takeaways from today's discussion?
Yeah, I've just been looking at the chat, so it's a lot of great chatter from the group here. No, I think it's great to see how much has been done over the past few years, and really excited to see where we're going with this. But I think across the board, companies are understanding that medical affairs, where they provide the value, is by providing these key actionable insights and what they do with it. And it's been great to talk to the panel here and learn from them as well.
Yeah, and Vic, takeaway?
I just think we're on the cusp of something really exciting with insights, because this is not a new thing. Insights have always been important to medical affairs, but we're on the edge of being able to really make it fully integrated, global, and a single point of insight resource in a system that other departments can then start to feed their insight into as well. And I just think it will make us more agile, responsive, and able to do the sorts of things that we ask clinicians to do for their patients. So great time to be working in this industry.
And I guess my parting comment, which is a little bit self-serving, but based on what Leona says, familiarize yourself with what's out there. The technology is changing rapidly. And so what was there 18 months ago is light years different from what's there now. And so if you're not aware of that, spend some time learning would be my thought there, because while technology is a piece of the pie with people and process and technology, that piece is changing pretty rapidly, and it's pretty impressive what some of these systems are starting to do. So in terms of a closeout here, we're going to go ahead and end the webinar. There was a white paper that Reuters generated as a result of that survey, and is talking to some of the experts here that we would welcome everyone to download and read on this topic. And I'll go ahead and close out the webinar, and the instructions of how to get to that white paper should be on the closeout screen. And you can always go to within3.com and ask via our site as well for any information regarding this webinar, any of the topics therein. Thank you to the panel. Hopefully this was interesting to everyone who's attended. Very exciting topic, and I look forward to talking with everyone again. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lance. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.